Hello, welcome to Best Movies channel. Today we will talk about The Lives of Others. The Lives of Others is a 2006 German drama film written and directed by Florian Henckel von Donnersmarck, marking his feature film directorial debut. At the end of the video, if you like the video, we will be happy you like the video and subscribe to the channel. The Lives of Others is at once a political thriller and a human drama. The film opens in East Berlin in 1984 with a sequence that alternates scenes from an interrogation with scenes from a training class for aspiring officers of the Stasi, or secret police. Stasi Captain Gerd Wieseler, codename HGWXX/7, is demonstrating his interrogation technique using audio of his own interrogation of a suspect. Wieseler instructs the students on how to tell whether a subject is lying. A student asks a question that Wieseler judges to be a bit too compassionate, and the professor marks the student's name on the attendance record. Surely this student has just flunked the course, or worse. During the feature's first 30 minutes, writer and director Florian Henckel von Donnersmarck draws a portrait of Wieseler that borders on caricature. Wieseler is a highly skilled officer of the Stasi, a proud, zealous, disciplined and entirely cold-blooded professional. He is one of the many cogs in the wheel of the system, working anonymously and tirelessly, convinced that his efforts are building a better socialist society. At the end of the class, Lieutenant Colonel Anton Grubitz, Wieseler's old school friend and probably his only friend, who has risen to the position of head of the culture department at Stasi, comes to invite Wieseler to a theatrical premiere. The play is by the celebrated East German playwright George Draiman, and its leading character is played by Draiman's lover, Christa Maria Seeland, an actress of great reputation. Draiman, who writes plays about the heroic proletariat, lives a rather comfortable life in a plush East Berlin apartment, enjoying a certain notoriety among DDR officials who value him because he's one of the few East German writers whose work is read in the West. He preserves the respect of the artistic community by using his relatively secure position for occasional interventions in favor of dissident fellow artists. Wieseler at once suspects that Draiman's loyalty to the party is not as strong as it would seem on the surface, even if the high party officials are convinced. Following the performance, Grubitz has a brief conversation regarding Draiman with Culture Minister Bruno Hemp, who also attended. Hemp is attracted to the leading lady. However, since Draiman is in the way, he must somehow be eliminated. Hemp, who happens also to be a member of the ZK, which has authority over the Stasi, tells Grubitz about his reservations regarding the playwright's loyalty to the said or Socialist Unity Party, suggesting full-scale surveillance of Draiman. Grubitz, always eager to better his own political future, asks his friend Wieseler to manage this procedure, the highest level of monitoring of suspected individuals. Codenamed Laszlo. Laszlo is a Hungarian name, perhaps a reference to the high suicide rates in Hungary, which we'll touch on later. Soon after, Hemp meets Draiman and Seeland at a party, and in a rather unsubtle way lets Christa Maria know of his feelings toward her. He also tweaks Draiman about the naivete of the belief displayed in his plays that people change. Hemp is convinced that people never change. Wieseler stalks Draiman, noting his comings and goings, and while the playwright is away, he has Draiman's apartment systematically bugged. As the bugging team leaves the apartment, Wieseler notices that a neighbor is watching them through the peephole in her door. He knocks and tells the neighbor that if she tells anyone what she saw, her daughter will lose her place at university. Wieseler sets up his surveillance headquarters in the attic, just above the apartment. As Draiman and Seeland prepare for a party in the flat in honor of Draiman's 40th birthday, Seeland presents him with a necktie and reminds him that he promised to wear it. She wonders if he knows how to tie it, and he replies that he's from the middle class and grew up wearing ties. He's since had to transcend his background, presumably to succeed in a socialist state. When he goes into the hall to put on the tie, though, it becomes clear that he was not telling the truth, and he makes a mess of it. He nips across the landing to knock on his neighbor's door and ask her to tie it for him. She comes into his apartment and ties the tie competently, but she's so nervous about the surveillance that Draymond asks whether she's sick, but of course she can't tell him what's the matter. The neighbor goes home with Krista Maria none the wiser. She's mildly impressed at Draymond's unexpected skill with a necktie. At the party, Draymond's close friend, theater director Albert Jerska, is shunned by the other guests. Because Jerska has been blacklisted for his anti-government opinions, he hasn't been able to work for years. Now people are afraid to be seen talking to him. Jerska's birthday gift to Draymond is sheet music for a work called Sonata for a Good Man. In a lunchtime scene at Stasi headquarters, a young agent starts to tell a joke about said leader Erich Honecker. He's overheard and forced to finish it by Grubitz, who then threatens to have him transferred to the most low-level, soul-crushingly boring job available, and finally claims he was kidding. Soon Wiesel's observations indicate that, contrary to his prejudices toward artists as free thinkers, Draymond's attitude toward the DDR and its set is not particularly scornful. In the meantime, Krista Maria has been convinced by Minister Hempf to be receptive to his advances, and when Wiesel finds out about this development, it dawns on him that maybe Operation Laszlo has more to do with the libido of the minister than with the DDR's security. From his surveillance post, Wiesel makes Draymond's doorbell ring to draw Draymond down to the street door in time to see the minister drop Seeland off and tell her when she must meet him again. Draymond is provoked to take action by the awareness of his lover's coerced sexual relationship with the minister and the suicide of his blacklisted friend Jerska. After learning of Jerska's death, Draymond sits at his piano and plays the piece Jerska gave him, the Sonata for a Good Man. Wiesel, listening in the attic, is moved to tears by the music. Krista Maria comes in and Draymond quotes Lenin saying if he'd kept listening to Beethoven's Appassionata he'd never have finished the revolution. Then he asks, can anyone who has heard this music, I mean truly heard it, really be a bad person? In the following scene, a small child in an elevator asks Wiesel if he's really with the Stasi, and confides that his father says Stasi agents are bad men who put people in prison. Wiesel starts to ask the boy his father's name, but stops himself. The film showcases Wiesel's empty life. He apparently has no family in an episode with a prostitute. After sex he asks her to stay a little while, but she has another appointment. Saying that he needs to reserve any time he wants in advance, she leaves him alone. Draymond resolves to help reveal the true face of the DDR government to the outside world. With the help of well-positioned West Germans who provide him with a typewriter that can't be traced back to him, he plans to publish an anonymous expose in one of the leading West German weeklies. Der Spiegel. The article concerns the DDR government's cover-up of the high suicide rate in East Germany. The government stopped collecting suicide statistics in 1977, at which time East Germany's suicide rate was higher than that of every other country in Europe except for Hungary. As they work on the article, Draymond's friends worry about being overheard. Draymond is sure his apartment isn't bugged, but his friends suspect otherwise. They devise a test. A contact in West Germany comes to visit Draymond's flat and they discuss his plans to return to West Germany with his son, an East German citizen, hidden under the seat of his car. They describe the car, a gold Mercedes, and the intended route, then announce their departure. Wieseler hears everything but decides not to tip off the border guards. When the car makes it across the border, Draymond and his friends conclude that his apartment is safe and unbugged. Wieseler has heard enough by now to know that Draymond is writing something that will be smuggled out for publication in West Germany. He's in a position to provide a victory to the DDR and a feather in his own professional cap by foiling Draymond's plot. However, Wieseler is starting to waver in his determination to bring Operation Laszlo to its conclusion. In the process of snooping in his victims' everyday lives, including their love lives, he has unconsciously been drawn into their world, which in turn has put his own in question. At one point, he approaches a despondent Christa Maria in a cafe to tell her how much he admires her work. She replies that he's a good man. He does not tell her his name. When Wieseler returns to the surveillance post, he learns that Christa Maria went home to Draymond, skipping her appointment with the minister, and that she won't see the minister again. When Draymond's article is finally published in the West, it is a public disaster for the DDR, and the playwright becomes a prime suspect. Grubitz is incredulous that with all his expertise, Wieseler could have missed the indications that Draymond was writing the article. Wieseler, like Draymond, has relied on Draymond's cover story that he's writing a play in honor of the DDR's 40th anniversary. Minister Henckel uses Christa Maria's drug addiction as an excuse to have her arrested and threatens to terminate her acting career unless she collaborates with the authorities and denounces her lover. As the author of the embarrassing article, which she does, the Stasi searches Draymond's apartment, but comes up empty-handed. Now Wieseler, who had withheld evidence concerning the source of the article, must decide where his allegiances lie. With the DDR and his brilliant career as a top Stasi officer, or with Draymond and Christa Maria, whose honest lives he has come to appreciate. In a tense scene, he sits in an interrogation room as Christa Maria is brought in. Knowing that she will recognize him from their encounter at the cafe and that Grubitz is watching through the one-way glass. But Seeland is too good an actress to give anything away. Wieseler offers her a choice: never work in the theater again, or become an informant and tell him where Draymond has hidden the typewriter he used to write the suicide article. He tells her that they already have enough evidence to put Draymond in jail, so there's nothing she can do for him, but she can save herself and hide her involvement with the Stasi. She agrees, miserably. Wieseler rushes to reach Draymond's apartment before the rest of the Stasi search team. He extracts the typewriter from its hiding place and spirits it away. A newly released Christa Maria comes home and feeds Draymond a line about being away in the country. She's in the shower when the Stasi team arrives and she emerges in her bathrobe in time to see Grubitz start to pry up the floorboard that still, she believes, conceals the typewriter. She makes bleak eye contact with Draymond, who knows she must have told them where to look. She leaves the house before Grubitz can get the board up to reveal nothing. When she reaches the street, Christa Maria steps deliberately into the path of a truck and is hit. Wieseler speaks to her briefly as she lies bleeding in the road, but retreats as Draymond embraces her and apologizes. He believes she removed the typewriter. She does. Grubitz, who seems slightly abashed by this development, calls off the investigation. However, he tells Wieseler that although Wieseler was clever enough to leave no tracks, Grubitz knows he covered for Draymond. Grubitz assures Wieseler that he will spend the remaining 20 years of his career steaming open the correspondence of his fellow citizens in a dank Stasi basement. About 5 years later, Wieseler is, indeed, steaming letters open in a basement office. A colleague behind him is listening to the radio. The young officer hears on the radio that the Berlin Wall has fallen and shares his earpiece so Wieseler can listen too. When Wieseler gets up and walks out of the Stasi office, the other workers follow him. 2 years later, Drayman runs into ex-minister Hemp and asks him why Drayman's apartment was never bugged. Hemp, before throwing in a spurious insult about Drayman's inability to sexually satisfy Christa Maria, assures Drayman that his home was thoroughly bugged, tells him about Operation Laszlo, and advises him to look behind his light switches. Drayman does so, and then visits the Stasi archives, which have been made public. In the lengthy records of Operation Laszlo, he discovers gaps covering evidence that would have been damning, along with beneficial misinformation, all attributed to a Stasi agent identified as HGWXX/7. He also learns that Christa Maria was released from custody too late to have extracted the typewriter from its hiding place. And he notices a red fingerprint on one of the pages left there by an agent who must have handled the mysteriously missing typewriter with its distinctive red ribbon. The file's final entry notes the transfer and demotion of HGWXX/7, who is blamed for the failure of the operation. Drayman looks up HGWXX/7's real name and tracks down Wieseler, who now delivers mail for a living, but doesn't speak to him. 2 years later still, Wieseler walks past a bookstore advertising a new release with huge posters of the author's face. The book, billed as a novel, is called Sonata for a Good Man, and the author is George Drayman. Wieseler goes inside, opens a copy, and reads the dedication, to HGWXX/7, in gratitude. At the checkout counter, the clerk asks whether he should gift wrap the book, and Wieseler replies, "No, it's for me."